Pursuant to New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, the board secretary caused notice of the meeting to be given public and the press on what date am I putting in there? January 3rd, and revised on. Public comment for this meeting is as follows. Attendees wishing to comment during the public session will state their name and address. The president of the Board of Education will recognize the attendee at the appropriate time. All of the board's policies and regulations relating to public participation in board meetings shall remain in effect, but not limited to the presiding officer's ability to limit each statement made by a participant to a 3-minute duration. Alice, will you call the roll?
Vice President Gamrikian, absent. Mr. Fernandez.
Here.
Mr. Munoz, absent. Mrs. Rubin, absent. Mrs. Saha, absent. Mrs. Silva. Present. Mrs. Turnbull.
Here.
Mrs. Olsarski. Here. And President Murphy.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Mrs. Callis, do you have any communications?
We do not. No, it's not a.
Nope. This is a.
No, we gotta take
Good,
it out.
right?
Yeah, we're in a workshop, should anybody come on or listen to this video, the purpose of the meeting tonight is specifically to discuss a board bylaw that was brought up at the last meeting, which was and launched into a series of other conversations, which was our committee status. Board members have been provided with a copy of our current district policy 0155. And I met last week with President Murphy and Vice President Gamrikian, who took some of the feedback that they'd been given and put it and worked and kind of looked at a whole bunch of other school districts' committee language. And so came up with a proposal that we wanted to put out, and really the purpose of this is entirely to discuss the committee language here. If we, because we have quorum, if we are interested and we know that we're expecting the two other board members to join, we may be able to pass it as a first read, and then we can submit the committee preferences so that at our next board meeting, we'll be able to do committee assignments and then go from there. So that's the larger goal. I want to kind of turn it over to you, Meredith, maybe to share kind of perspective on the draft and what we used, and then it's a workshop. So what do you think? What should change? In the copy that you were given, there's a highlight, and that highlight is all new language, and that came from other districts, depending on which one it was. Some were from New Providence, some were from, we used New Providence, we used Scotch Plains, Fanwood, we used a variety of districts. So all of which were included in your drafts folder under comparative policies.
Okay, so this is the old one.
That's the old
You guys
one.
all have this, you've seen this one. This is the new one. I don't know if everybody had time to look at the new one. The highlighted language is the new language, right?
Did you take stuff out too? Or just
We did, but
We
it
did.
became very confusing.
Right.
So I have something that shows all these lines through, but to go, so if anybody wants to see that, I can give it to you, but I thought for a purpose of clarity,
I think the easiest,
it would be easier to take a look at it now.
so, okay, I guess we should say, everybody reviewed the new one? How do you guys wanna do it? Do you wanna go around and talk about it? Does anybody have questions? Do you wanna give me do you want me to give you kind of a broad spectrum of what we did? What we did was take all of the committees, we had these 8 committees, and we kind of, for lack of a better word, smush them into saying we're gonna have 3 committees that kind of encompass all of these 8 committees. So everybody will sit on one committee. This negotiations and the tab committees, it's a 4th committee, but we're having it now because it's already an ongoing thing. It's gonna stay as Christy, Paula, and myself, because we're into negotiations. The tab component, it can have somebody on it who's not on negotiations, who isn't conflicted out. Is that what we said?
No, we said, because we said, we would, Hector's currently
On tab,
on tab, Mark
Right.
was on tab,
so,
so we were
I
gonna,
was on tap, but I'm
you were on tab.
right,
for
Well,
negotiation.
Hector's conflicted from negotiations,
Right.
so
so are you,
the whole
so,
piece was gonna be that on tab, we could have people that were not in negotiations, cause negotiations has to be people that are not conflicted out.
Right.
So we could keep it, we can look at that, whether we keep them as separate, or if
Right.
we put them together.
I don't know what we'll do.
Right now, we're not having tab meetings because we're in negotiations, so that's part of the reason for.
Right.
Anyway.
Um,
It is a nice thing though that you get this insight into the teacher's world. So my question is, does it have to be an ongoing set committee? Why can't can we do like an
Well,
alternating?
a rotating person goes into tab meeting?
My only challenge with it is that
you can't
part of
follow
our, there's a
through?
consistency
Yeah.
in follow-up.
I
So
get
you
that
know,
too.
like, otherwise, is it the same thing each time, or hey, we just talked about that
Right.
2, like,
No,
Right,
3 months ago, or.
as I was saying it, I was thinking.
That would be my only, I don't have an issue with it
right,
at its root, I just think that we lose, like, having to stop and go, oh, well, we talked about that, and this is what it is. Puts whoever's new to the table at a,
Disadvantage.
or a deficit of information that it would seem other people have, but not intentionally.
So we went through and we looked at the other districts and kind of what they were doing, and then we said what would serve us and our purposes. And then we left up, that representatives thing is things we always have, the town liaison, the state and school boards, and the Union County Educational Services Commission, and then the liaisons to the PTAs and the PTSOs, which we've always had. And then if you go to the next page, we broke it down and took our current existing language and then added new language to each, each committee. Do you wanna go through each one committee by committee? Where's everybody's thoughts, feelings, concerns? You wanna go around the room?
Well, I have something to say,
Sure.
not just about specific committees, but also, I'm sure it wasn't read yet, but number 3, on the first page it says finance, facilities and security, but on the third page, or whatever, it says safety / so just for consistency.
Where does it have?
Oh.
Numbers,
Safety/security, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
right.
good
Thank you.
catch, thank you.
thank you for the typo.
Well, I mean, and I could come back and go, which one do you prefer?
Yeah.
I think it came from another school
Safety
district.
and security.
Had
Yeah.
the safety, security, and I thought it was,
So that took also, safety component we were talking about.
Although if I had to pick one, I'd rather safety than security. I feel like security can fit under safety, but.
which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Well, I just have a comment for discussion that committees don't meet on a regular basis. I know, like other districts,
Oh, alright, well,
they have schedule for committees. For us, it's regular. It's like all of a sudden, boom, committees call.
Yeah.
Okay, we go. If you have something to discuss, but we have to have something to discuss all the time. Technically, if we meet once a month, okay. If we schedule it once a month and we don't have anything to discuss, really, we cancel. But I find it very surprising that we don't do it. And what, we don't have something to discuss every month? That's not.
Well, it's one of the reasons why we're looking at this, because having 9 different committee meetings, like if we added another committee to the current 8, having 9 different committee meetings every month would
Okay,
be
even
a
not
lot.
every month, but on some kind of regular basis.
For
But
sure.
right, this smaller number of committees, we can do it every month or every 6 weeks, whatever, but on some kind of regular schedule, because then you maybe in a way like forced to have a conversation about something which is important. So that's my comment.
Well, I think by smushing, I'm gonna keep using this smushing word and containing these committees into streamlining this, there's always gonna be something, you're gonna cover more bases in one meeting, right? So there's always gonna be something to kind of discuss.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think it would be a bad thing for
Yeah.
us to be looking strategically and having some type of a schedule of set committee, with everything except for the negotiations tab, because that's a different ballgame, but, and that's a part of the reason why we also said, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm
Yeah.
remembering the conversation you and Paula had, by having 3 members on each with the president going as the fourth, it would allow for some consistency, because right now we end up with who can cut, we have 4 people, somebody's absent, who's the third, and then I have to brief the president, and if the president isn't there because it's the fourth, so we really just took best practices from what other school districts were doing.
Right, so in our research and what we saw is that's a gross generalization. A lot of districts, what they do is they take the board, they say, okay, we've got 3 committees, each committee encompasses many more topics. Everybody sits on one committee, the president sits on all of the committees, so that you're not it's like a bad game of telephone tag sometimes, right?
Yes.
So just for argument's sake, you 3 are on a committee. I'm not in the committee. She has to tell me, or you have to tell me what happened in the committee, and then there's a breakdown in terms of what the actual conversation was, and it gets confusing as to who said what and how it was said. So whoever the president is, however it goes, if the president is sitting in every meeting, in theory, then you're hearing exactly what's going on, and then she doesn't have to relay it to me. I heard what you said exactly in theory, right?
And it'd also make your
And
weekly
then
meetings
our
a little
weekly
bit
meeting
shorter
is
too,
shorter because we've all sat and heard the same thing the first to go around and then when I have to start relaying it to the others, how many people, my math is starting to get, it makes it easier for all of us to be in the same page quicker, right? So then the way a lot of these districts are operating is everybody sits on one. To Elena's point, there's some sort of a schedule. Everybody's hearing information, it's easier to disseminate amongst everybody and move on and get it done.
What about minutes and agendas for these committees?
So we don't have to have an agenda to have a meeting. There doesn't need to be an agenda. We could just say,
Well, but it does say,
it says it's a proposed.
Yeah, it's not a formal
It's not a
agenda like
formal
we have to
agenda.
do for a board meeting because
Yeah.
there's no action taken. What it does have, and I do think this is added language at the bottom, is it says, and I think this follows up, Jerry, from one of your concerns ongoing, is like, how do we know what happened? And then we have that all committees must report at the board at the next meeting. So for instance, if we have
That was new language.
if we have a committee meeting, and let's say it's governance, policy, and communications, that at the next meeting, that policy chair, that the chairperson says, we met at this date, this was what was discussed, and then that way, that all becomes public record.
So,
So that could happen either during communications or during new business or old business. It doesn't have to be
Well,
another.
if there were issues that were gonna be voted on or discussed, like among committee and then voted on in the next meeting, if it came out in old business, it would be after the meeting almost, right?
Well, it's all relative, right? So, like,
Right.
for example, if you met just as an update for something that didn't have board action, then you could just say the facility finance and safety security committee met on blank date. We discussed the following, blah 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 blah, and
Right.
then
I talking to other towns, what I've heard too, and I'm not saying we should do this, but I know like sometimes they have a workshop meetings, right? Which nothing's voted on, but just discussions on the upcoming agenda. Some of them would give reports from committees that would be discussed. Like my concern again is if I'm gonna vote on something that was discussed in a committee or talked about in the certain committee and then all of a sudden it brought an issue that we were gonna vote on, like, are we gonna be able to get that information in time to be able to vote if I'm not on that committee? You know what I'm saying? Enough information. Again, and that's where talking to other towns too, sometimes, some of them, fair amount, I get it, we're not changing the date, that's fine, but to be able to get maybe the agenda with an extra business day in there instead of Friday, have the weekend and then the meeting on Monday. I know I've discussed that with a couple of you here. And talking to a couple towns, I know a few of them, you know, obviously the president gets it, works with the superintendent on it, gets it way ahead. And then the other members that I had heard had gotten it 2 days ahead. just to help us make decisions and get answers to some questions. Like, I'll give an example. When we had the one about the club for the middle school, the inclusive club, and Kristen, you had said you had gone to the governance committee meeting right before, I think it was right before we had our meeting, and you had questions answered, and you felt comfortable with those questions answered from that committee, which is fine. But someone like myself, I didn't have that opportunity because I'm not on that committee. And that committee met, seems like, just minutes or an hour before the regular meeting, right? Before the board was meeting.
I will say, can I just interject real
Yeah.
quick? Only because predating you, I mean, years ago, similar situations have been, hard in our voting where like when something's discussed in that meeting, then we go to vote. The people who weren't in that meeting did have, maybe questions or didn't have a chance to have them answers. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not
And it's
saying
not
it
this
to
one
be
particular, I'm thinking of something prior, but like, I've had a similar kind
Yeah,
of,
I'm not saying it
situation.
should be, it's like, all right, so, and again, I'm not saying we should do this, but it's almost like, it sounds like that committee is almost like a workshop, where, hey, this is gonna be on the agenda today, these are some, I don't know, because I never sat in on that committee, so I might be completely wrong. But sitting from where I'm sitting, that's what it seems like. Like, it's almost like, okay, this is on the agenda for today, before we go to the meeting, I don't know how it's discussed. I really don't. I might be totally wrong, again. But it just seems like it. And then, not being on that committee, like, if there was another day where, hey, let me see what was talked about. Hey, you discussed this. I'm on the fence on it, or I need some more information besides what I got from another board member. How do you feel about this? Or what am I missing on this? Or is there something I don't see? This is how I feel. But there's no time with that because it goes right from that meeting to a meeting.
Yeah.
And that opens, and that's where that transparency, that open is where I feel like, hey, one more business day to be able to, like, if I'm working Friday and I get that agenda Friday night, and sometimes I'm working nights and sometimes I'm working days, so my schedule is really, but let's say I'm working night, I get to look at it when I get home at 11 at night or 12 or whatever, have questions. I know the first time I looked at it, I sent you guys stuff right away on the weekend, and then I was told, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that because it's a weekend, and I totally got it, and I felt horrible for doing it. And then, so, well, if it's an emergency, you can send out, if you really need something answered, go to the president, but you can reach out to both of you on a question, but it's the weekend. And then Monday, if we're working, either you're working during the day, or if I go on days to be able to make the meeting at night, it's like, okay, now I gotta look, hey, did you get the question answered or not? Like, I don't know, just that. And I'm just saying that extra day where if I got it on Thursday, looked at it Thursday night, was able to ask a question on a Friday where you're both in the school district in here and can get the questions answered, I just feel better on certain, and it's not a lot. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot. There's not a lot of
Yeah, I don't
times.
disagree with
There's not a lot of times where I need to know something, but there are times, and if it's coming to us, the way I feel about it is, if it's coming to me or this board to vote on, then there is some importance to it, right? I mean, or else it wouldn't even come to us, right? So whether it's something just, you're hiring somebody, okay, it's not like I'm asking, well, why did you hire this person, or what made you pick this person? I get it, that's your job, your role. But we have to vote on it, right? And if the person turns out to be a complete idiot, we're gonna hear it from our residents also. But my point is, if it's coming to us, then it's important enough to ask questions and vote. And I feel like sometimes getting it on a Friday afternoon and having that weekend, that Monday is tough. It's just,
I appreciate, one of the pieces that I asked to do when I came on board and when I brought Michelle on, was to get it earlier. Because board members didn't used to get it even on
Right,
until
and I
Saturday.
know the laws are
So
not.
I just wanna stop and say, we already moved it forward. So we're following the legal to the T, right?
know
We
that.
wanna make sure we're following those pieces. Our challenge becomes, in all truth, we have deadlines that we set for our whole group because we have to get through contracts, we have to send contracts to the attorneys, we have to get through personnel, and you end up with addendas and addendas and addendas. And so one of our challenges is, how do we find the right place to then say to everybody else, stop, don't send me anything else. The only thing I'm gonna accept from here on out for a board agenda is a personnel is hiring. Because if we send it out on Thursday and then I have another set of addendas and then I'm waiting on something and you get addendas on Monday morning, that's just a piece of the challenge with the business. But I'm gonna come back because when I got here, the issue of the school governance meeting occurring when it occurred was a part of like the tradition of this board. So it was somewhat odd to me on some level, but it's kind of like context, like you kind of come in and you figure it out. So when Yelena brought up this committee piece, it was just like, yeah, I really had been wanting to make some of these changes for a while, and it was clear that adding another committee wasn't going to help us move forward. So you'll notice that this is actually broken out differently specifically because of that. And I'm going to also say on one of these committees in particular, the policy committee, all the board members have access to a folder well before the board meeting. In which case you can see whatever we're talking about outside of the committee. Because to your point, to me, policy is one of your most important jobs, right? Is policy. So you need to see what we're talking about. Know that within committee is where we're going to get into the nitty gritty. Are we doing this now? Oftentimes it's just straight from Strauss Esme, right? There's no deep thought. It's like we need to upgrade the AED policy to reference this legal case. So it doesn't take a big push. But like this for us, board committees or any of the board bylaws, well, that takes time. It takes some like, okay, well here you go. Which was why in this case everybody got the same copy of all of the same documents as soon as I could. And before I sent this to you guys, I had Dennis McKeever take a look at it. So I knew that from a board council, he looked at it through a what's appropriate. And then as soon as he said, yes, you guys got it. So my whole piece here is, I think we need to look at having, like, what is the topic of the meeting in board governance? We should certainly, to your point, report out at the very least, because that's what we're not doing, right? We meet for board governance where what we talk about in the current committee is literally the agenda. Who's had any issues with the agenda? Is there anything else going on in the community that people should, just kind of like a general, are you hearing any concerns?
That's the governance.
That's what happens normally in the governance meeting.
But I think we should also talk about how we broke it out a little bit, so
Well,
it's not even gonna look like
It
what.
wouldn't even look the same
It's
anymore
not
at
gonna,
all.
school
Right.
government as it was, no longer really will exist. We kind of did away with that. Or in my understanding at least, to
Yeah.
make it, because it wasn't working, it's just not.
There is not anything that was really coming of it
Yeah.
except this perspective of this group of people get to sit down and have a conversation with the rest of everybody.
When you guys did have the 2 meetings a month, was one of them a workshop or they were both? No, they were
No.
both voting, right? I don't recall. I recall always votes in every
No.
one.
So they've never workshopped here.
They don't have a committee of the whole, that's what you're
Right.
suggesting.
This language does include a committee of the
Yeah.
whole. This has language for
Yeah,
a committee
No,
of
I'm
the
saying currently, there's no committee
whole.
of the whole.
Currently, you do not have that,
Right,
which is
right,
why we
right.
have
But
to
this,
put
like-
this up as a retreat
Right.
/ workshop.
Right.
So we can have committee of the whole. I am not in favor of workshopping an agenda 2 weeks before we
No.
have the meeting. And
I
I
agree
can
with
say that because I've watched it happen in school districts and it's just
I agree with
a
you.
mess.
Township did it a few years back where they would get reports on a Monday. To me, it was just, we're
Prolongs the
doing the same
process.
meeting twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just felt like we were doing the same meeting twice.
Exactly.
As long as, but it does.
Which is what school government
Yeah.
is.
Right, but, and my point that as long as the communication comes out of these committees where, okay, because it seems like there, a lot was discussed in some of them. That one in particular, the governance ones, where it came out like, well, they had questions, it seems like they got them answered.
But if I wasn't sitting on that committee, I would have picked up the phone
Right.
on
Right.
Monday morning and called and got my questions answered.
If you could,
I
right.
waited
Right.
knowing that I was gonna have a face-to-face meeting and
But it's sometimes when you're like, sometimes it just, sometimes the scheduled part is what's, and again, it's not every issue. I mean, how many issues do we have where they're really tough questions? It's not every meeting, obviously, thank God. But those do come, I mean, that are
Can
That's
have
a-
some level of
a
contentious
debate or,
debate.
you know where I'm going.
Yes.
I mean,
No, I totally do. And I mean, we never know. We never know
No,
what's
and listen-
around the corner, so.
And I think the more information we get, the more questions we can get answered, the better the meeting, right? The more information that someone has to make a decision, the more, you know, the questions are answered and, okay, now I get it. You know, I see what you see, or maybe you see something now that I saw. It just makes the meetings a little smoother, and it's okay to
productive.
disagree, as you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I'm going to say it also depends on following chain of command here too. So, for instance, if it's a question about the agenda, it should technically go to the president first. If it gets sent to me and I am in the universe, if it's like Rachel, you really need to answer this question, the president will tell me, like, okay, hold up, where am I? Let me take a spot. So I think that's a critical piece too, is understanding if it's an emergency, like if there's something that the board president doesn't know about what's happening, because usually, not all the time, and I'll say it depends also on the board president, because their schedules, but usually I meet or talk to the board president about the agenda when they get it. I can say, heads up, you're gonna see these people on the agenda, we're hiring them, really excited, or this is what's happening, or this is why this is there. I usually.
I imagine, I don't know, but you have the right to change the agenda, right? Or is that all superintendent? I mean, to come up with the, to finalize the agenda if you wanted to make, or take.
I would like to think of it as a collaboration.
Yeah, no, I don't mean it.
Wanna, like,
No, I'm just saying as chair, as president of the board, I more of a question than anything. I mean, you
I mean,
could-
the board president has the right to, I think, has the right to ask something be held or
Right,
put
right,
off
right.
for
Yeah.
a reason, but
Same as the only difference of the mayor and
You
the
know,
township committee.
It's Robert's rules. You would,
Yeah.
they would have to
Right.
go through Robert's rules
Right.
to have it added to the agenda in some form, and
You know.
the attorney is there to, and board secretary.
you know, but
Yeah, so yeah, of course. So my point is, you're involved in that agenda from, you know, like Echo, which you should be. I mean, that's the right thing. I get it. Yeah.
Well, and I'll also say different, and I've done it with all of the board presidents. There's been something, and they're like, you know what, we need a committee this, like, you know, whether it's a policy, whether it's a hiring and work chart, a job description, those are usually probably the two places where it is like, Rachel, we can't put this through now. We need to do we need to do multiple committees on this. This is a big deal. So that's part of that, and then I pulled it. Said, okay, great. Well, we'll pull it. Michelle, take it off. So you'll get a copy of an agenda that'll be then different on Monday than it was on Friday. Doesn't happen that often now, mostly because I have a better understanding of the district as a whole now and how we operate and who needs what, and kind of what those needs are. I think the goal here, and so I mentioned at our meeting that some of this comes from the discussion with New Jersey school boards about board governance. And that was, I mean, it was just a really good workshop. So they had introduced the board manuals, which I shared with you guys from California. There were a couple others. Two were from California, so it's clear that like the California School Boards Association has something that they're doing, and it's related to the National School Boards Association. But one of the things that I really pulled away, so on that last day, which was like I could have missed the whole other workshop because the last day was the best for me. There was one workshop on committees, and then there was another workshop on governance. And I think as we were talking with folks that had been through, this is my first time under my kind of universe and my way of thinking about it is how much more information can we give the community as well as new board members about what the expectations are for the board environment. And so it comes back to saying we need to have one committee that's really functionally thinking about board governance. So is the agenda right? Like what agenda, like are there agenda issues and questions, policy? Then instead of that policy committee will also see that because whoever's in charge of board governance as a committee is going to be looking at bylaws. They'll be looking at, you know, what do we need? What can we do better functionally? And how do we build out a board manual that's going to be a cohesive look at who we are as a school board? And then communications, because we used to have that communications committee, and it would seem that that would fall right in there, in that group. So that's different than our current school government because it's very particular to policy and actual board governance, as opposed to just a whatever is in the agenda. And then that would break it down to school administration, academic programs, and athletics, because usually that school government would also then be about, hey, what's happening? What are our plans for this? I would say, oh, we have a curriculum, we're following the new state mandate. And we didn't previously even have a curriculum or instruction related committee at all. So that would then fill that, and then we added athletics because it's really kind of a student experience, like related committee was the goal there. And then finance, facilities, and safety security, because really so much of what we do in security is related to facilities, so it makes a whole lot of sense, and it's all about funding. So, and this is really how other school districts grouped them, so we took the key there. And then the other one we talked about. So to your point, the school government committee as we know it would be gone.
So it's not gonna be like, hey, here's the agenda today, let's see what's.
No, it's done, because it doesn't really.
Yeah, and we could ultimately say, there would be some committee meeting before or after the meeting as a whole. We could, or say we're gonna have committee meetings on this date of the month and we'll do 45 minutes, 45
I was
minutes,
talking
45
of-
minutes, like if we can stack them. We need to plan them. Currently, it's, they can call a meeting, so usually I'll say
Yeah.
the most frequent one called has been athletics. I get more requests. Policy, we really ran via the chairperson because everybody was clued in, and if there was anybody that wanted to talk about the policies that were being done, then he would say, all right, that was Mark last year. Mark would say, I think we need a committee meeting for this.
Right.
Or he would read through it, tell the committee members, I've read through this. I don't see any major concerns. I would vote for it to be approved. So that was how that committee went. But this is our opportunity to say,
So we're
let's do
pretty
it.
much gonna be on one, we'll be on one of these.
Everybody would be on one committee,
Well, we're going to be on one committee,
except for the board.
Yeah, no, I get it,
Right.
negotiations and
but this business of
orders and that.
minutes, I think that the important thing here is that, so say Hillary is on whatever, a committee, there's a meeting. Excuse me, the next board meeting, if she's the chair of that committee, she would report out to the whole committee, or I'm sorry, to the whole board about that, and the community about that meeting, right? So,
On this date,
on this date, we met, we discussed X, Y, and Z. You
Which
know,
could be part of communication.
which could be, so we could do it at the beginning of the meeting, wherever we think it should go. Which means that we're getting it out to the community, but also out to the board, and then obviously if we have any more questions about it, we can always talk to each other about it behind the scenes, but I think it's probably just a better
I
way.
mean, you could also add committees.
Yeah, I mean,
Committees can also meet on Zoom, not face to face, but just to make it easier, Zoom or whatever, Teams.
Yeah.
Is also an option, just to make it easier.
I like the idea of having a schedule at least, and like if there's nothing to talk about, then you just don't meet, cancel the meeting or something. It's kind of tough when you're not sure,
Yeah, when they just pop up.
and then, yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna say right now we're going to schedule finance, facilities, safety, security, because we're in the middle of budget. So those are
Yeah.
the first ones that we're gonna prioritize. Right. But because we like to meet with everybody beforehand without violating the rules, we'll end up calling finance, facilities, safety, security, and board governance, policy, and communications prior to the full budget presentation so that everybody can get a hold of it. Now, the finance, facilities, safety, security group usually is the one that gets the first committee meeting because they can pare down, ask a whole bunch of questions, and then we come back. We may adjust it, we may take that feedback, or we may just move into the next meeting, the next committee. But that way, so there will be in the next few weeks, or I'll say next month, so it'll really be in February.
No, so usually,
I'm looking at you and I'm thinking about
right, no,
scheduling.
usually end of January facility goes, it's like as it stands. the facility goes, and then February, finance may see it once or twice, and then again, transportation will end up being, so in the beginning of the year, that committee, hands down, is gonna meet once in the very least a month. But because of this maybe things that come up, finance may see 2 in February. So,
Well,
all
and the
relative.
chair would reach out to whoever else is
Right.
there to say, okay, when couldn't we meet? What's the best way to do it? Like,
Things can come up, of course.
oh, for sure.
But still, having said so.
Yeah. I think we could maybe try to figure that out.
And also, can we discuss minutes? Because that's another meeting, and it's actually here. But we,
there is inconsistency with the chairpersons taking minutes.
I'm the biggest offender of Jim Department.
Yeah, I just felt that that's important if it's something that's gonna be voted on in the next meeting, that, hey, let me see what was discussed. Okay, we're gonna vote on something that maybe was discussed in one of these committees. Let me look at the agenda. Was it discussed? Yeah, okay, let me see. Can I reach out to one of them and see what their opinion is?
I'm gonna say this. I think, as an offender of not doing minutes or writing part of minutes, I've been on this board how many years now? I've never asked for minutes. I find that, because the minutes could be like 4 bullet points that mean nothing. The best way to get information is always to call another board member. Call somebody on the committee and ask what happened in the meeting.
well, but it's not the best because it's not consistent, because this board member can say something else, how it works.
But
having it on the paper.
Yeah, but my minutes, because I'm a shitty minute writer, I'm being totally honest. My minutes could be like, we talked about
You're being recorded.
That's fine. I'm very honest. My minutes could be, we talked about busing.
Hopefully you're not gonna be here.
We talked, no, but the minutes are not gonna be, because if you, the
They
minutes
don't
are,
have to be verbatim.
they don't have to be verbatim, they're like bullet points. So if you,
But just because there is no agenda, right? So because there's no agenda, maybe those minutes, just to see if it's something, because, I'm not gonna reach out to every committee if it's something that's not,
no, I
gonna
don't
be
disagree.
voted on and maybe in the next
I don't
next
disagree,
meeting.
we should be holding each other to a higher
There's
standard.
a reason
for
you have,
minutes.
there's a reason they're being requested.
No, I understand,
If they're being done poorly,
But my minutes could be, we talked about the roof in the field house, if I'm making sports minutes up. We talked about the roof in the field house, we talked about the lacrosse team, we talked about how many children play football. Those could be the minutes, and then that's it.
and that's enough for me to maybe say, hey, Meredith, how did that work out with the girls?
I
lacrosse?
understand, but I want everybody to feel really comfortable knowing that I feel like I could speak for most members of this board, call somebody. If you don't like, call somebody else, like, talk to people. Shoot somebody an email and say, hey, do you have a minute to chat? Like, whoever's sitting in whatever seat, I feel like most people on this board are more than willing to have a conversation.
Well, now it'll be a little easier, but sometimes it's hard to even remember who was on the board.
No, but
On different committees,
I
rather different committees, because we.
call
Right,
somebody,
I mean,
phone a
that's it.
friend.
I have a list on my thing.
Right, because I can't keep the
never
committee straight.
remember.
Now it's easier.
No, I
Call
have to,
somebody
I look
else.
on
You have to go to the
online.
spreadsheet, right?
So
So this will make it easier. Call somebody and say, hey, what happened? Or can you bring me up to speed if you don't feel like those my point is, if you don't feel like those minutes are in depth or good enough, call somebody.
So,
No,
What about
in-depth
this-
are good enough, but sometimes, most of the time, there are no minutes.
Right.
I want to interject just for a second, because this is where when we start talking about board governance,
Right.
for example, it's a board governance thing. Michelle and I are there as ex officios. She's there in the board secretary position.
Right.
So I think there's an opportunity to say this is our expectation for the minutes. In which case, if the expectation is simple, it's not going to take a whole lot. Then let's set it as a simple expectation, so then there's not variation in that response.
Follow our own policy. It's like-
Well, but when we move into the governance manual, then it gives, so I always think about after me. Like, I use it I learned if you get hit by the
beer truck?
I get it, well, we talked about the beer truck.
The beer
It was
truck.
always a beer truck. I don't know why it was a beer truck, and I can give this to my last superintendent, because he would say, you're setting this up, what happens if you get run over by a beer truck?
Mhm.
So I was always thinking, so when,
And too much insurance involved with the bus.
Right.
School bus.
Please, no talk of anything. That's why we can talk about a proverbial beer truck. The point being, after we're all gone, what would we want the board to still look like, right? And what could we say we did to contribute to a meaningful board governance structure? And some of that means setting expectations that become a part of the context. So like I said, when I got here, I followed the committee structure as it had historically been done. No questions, like and any new superintendent comes in and does the same thing. You don't come in and change everything automatically because this is a board.
You have to learn it.
You have to figure out like what does it mean, because I'll tell you how you operate and how other boards of education operate are very different and across all 500 some odd school districts in the state. And it's little things like, who does the communications, what do you say, like all of those are little things. But if we find something that as a board you say, this is little but it's big, and we want to as a board come to terms with this is what our expectation is, then let's use this opportunity to do that. And that's kind of where my head is in putting a board governance meeting
I wanna
together.
fill in the blank sheet. And open, no, I'm
No,
serious.
Right, but no, but
No, I'm
that's
serious, like,
great.
it upsets me every time I have to do things that I'm going back, looking at old board
Yes.
minutes, cutting and pasting who
I
the
agree.
members are, like an open
Yes.
It's just a tab.
Google
Or a
Doc
tablet.
or
Or a
tablet
tablet,
that's
yes.
there, these are the board members here, and you can actually do it as the meeting's going on, like,
Great
this is what
idea.
we're talking about.
With a Google folder that you put it into, we'll
And then
create
it's
committee
done.
folders.
By the end
and
of the
be
meeting, the
Minutes
minutes
are done.
are there, you wanna know what happened that day, you can go and look.
There you go.
And then there's no, oh my god, I forgot to do the minutes, I should've done them last night, like,
Yes, I think it's a great idea.
So there is currently a committee meeting folder, but it's all relative to when I actually get them, so I can pop it in.
But
But
Michelle
we-
shouldn't have to put them in if you can put it in.
Can we add them to because I know I emailed them to you that time.
Right now, it's my folder, but I could create
I
a
couldn't put it in.
shared where everybody can be
I
editor.
think that's a great idea.
But you just have to be careful with the editing, because if
Just say
anybody
if I
can
delete
edit it, it's not necessarily like what transpired.
Or delete it by accident,
Right.
and it's like, oh, sorry, I deleted your minutes.
Well, it is Google, so I don't think anything
Is
ever
what we
really
say.
deleted.
No, it isn't, alright, good.
Yeah, but right now the process is the chairperson or whoever sat that was able to take notes, is supposed to take them, send them to me, and then instead of sharing it out individually, I just dropped it into the folder, so that you could see for the year.
No, I didn't even know.
I usually,
I didn't even know.
I usually, when I, like similarly to the beginning in January, I usually send out, this is the link, so you have access to it.
but
I
it's in
haven't
the
sent out the
Google
24
Drive.
one, huh?
It's in the Google Drive.
It is in the
Yeah.
Google Drive, right.
It's other committee.
Great idea.
So I think we have to do some sense of shared ownership, shared responsibility, make it clear, and then we come back and say, hey, as a board, can you hold each other accountable for making sure that these are done? I'll say one of the challenges with the way the previous committee was that sometimes the committee person wasn't there, so then we had, we went down, then the alternate wasn't available.
And then at that point, no one was taking notes because you didn't realize that you were the backup committee person. No, really, that happened a
No,
lot.
I know. So. And if the board president is available at all of the committees, then the board president can also be the contact that you can, consistently, that the president or the vice president was at the meeting. And you can call them for additional information.
Did you quit your job yet?
I don't really have to right now.
But also, how do we know who attended?
Well, we need everybody to
How do we
be,
know
and it's
who
like
was in
consistent.
attendance?
Well, I think now that there's less committees and there's only, if we have some sort of a plan.
But let's say
Oh,
you
back in
couldn't
the-
make
right.
it, someone replaced you.
Mhm,
You
right.
don't know.
Well, you put it in the minutes.
Right, it'll be in the minutes now.
It would say in the minutes.
Okay,
who
so
was
it
at
comes back to the meeting.
Now we're gonna do a
Before we
template.
call,
Right.
someone we-
Right,
we
you would be
know.
able to go online,
Right.
see the minutes,
Okay.
go,
So,
all right.
assign responsibility, conduct the study, recommendation. I'm sorry.
So when you guys do documents like that, or when we do documents like that, it's in Google Docs, or do you have to follow a certain?
So
like,
there's
does
a
it have to be
template.
Word doc, it has to be Google Docs? Like,
So historically, it's been in like a Word document.
okay, but
Um,
is there one in there now? No, it has to be
there's a
generated?
template, one template, and then people just fill it in. They basically, it's very simple.
Supposed to, let's say supposed to.
Supposed to.
So we can in essence make one up already for each committee once we head with what the committees are.
So the template's already formed. If you decide as a board that you want to do it as a Google Doc, essentially it would make sense for consistency purposes if I create it and then
Attach it to the calendar. if
attach
it's in
it,
Google.
and then people could, I'll have whoever the chairperson is be the editor, or for that day switch it as the editor so that people don't mistakenly delete it or whatever. I mean, there's different ways to go about it. And then it's like, it could be real time, because if, like, my minutes are pretty real time. But if someone is
Well,
tech enough, they can do it while they're listening.
I was gonna say, what I've been doing with the leadership meetings is pre-linking a Google Doc in each of the calendars so that everybody knows, and then that Google Doc that's like the agenda, it's already there and it's in the calendar, and then it's in the right folder. Like I make sure it's linked to the folder. So it's once it's Google Doc, it's relatively easy to do. We just haven't done it that way. But if we schedule the meetings, we could just make it a part of our meeting scheduling process that a calendar invite with the meeting would include the Google Doc, but that only goes to those members of the committee until the committee has met the information in.
And then the minutes would be linked on
Folder
other folders.
for
Yeah.
everybody.
Because you would just
Okay.
you create a governance, policy, communications, agenda, January, let's say. That goes in the Google Calendar invite, and then Google has a pre-thing that says agenda, and it will put everybody that was invited to the meeting on the top. So, and if we weren't in public session, I'd have to show you how I did it today at our principals meeting. But alas, I'm not going to put my principal meeting minutes up for general public. But you just automatically can push it, and it will create a document. So it may be that if we can just create a preloaded agenda or document, then that can become the notes. It's not hard. We just have to get in the practice of it.
Need a smaller table. We need a smaller table so we can. It just, a question, so in our committee minutes, 'cause
For sure.
I have an issue when I every time I go into the docs, whatever, the Google, group thing. Sometimes I feel like I'm not seeing it or I'm not even right in the folder. But it says the committee minutes, committee meetings for 2023.
Right.
If I go in it, it's empty.
Shouldn't be in.
Right, that's what I think it would be, because I know I've given in minutes and I assume they've been in there. But, and I know you've seen it, because you've asked me about some of them. So I know there
I didn't
have to
see
be in there, and when I click in, it's empty.
No,
So
I didn't
don't
see yours. I didn't see yours.
Oh, you didn't?
No. The only ones I'd seen were policy and finance.
There's 2 sports in here.
Yeah, sports
Is it-
was.
That's
Your
the name of
sports.
it?
Yeah, but what was
Yeah.
the last sports? Maybe I just missed it.
December.
The December.
Okay, maybe I
I wrote
missed that.
camp committee
Hmm?
ones for sure.
Right, that's what I'm just saying,
There's
I don't know if I'm
finance
even
in
in the
here,
right one, so I
there
click
was
it's
one
empty. I don't need
negotiation.
to-
Yeah, maybe I did the same.
Policy, and then I also
remember
in there,
seeing
I
that
also put
one
the
sports
assignment.
one.
I see.
There's not that many.
Yeah.
Consistency is definitely an area of weakness.
When did the second one go in the sports? Maybe I just didn't.
was in December,
Honestly,
that was in
like
December.
10 minutes ago.
Oh, when did, okay.
So,
So that's why.
I did see it.
So I didn't see
I did.
it.
But like I said, that's also just where I'm saying it's another step for you to do if it can be a group one without compromising the fact that, oops, sorry, I deleted something, but if you're saying there's a backup that kind of saves that, God forbid someone accidentally deletes
you would
it.
just have to go into Google and then.
Right,
the
then
trash.
does it really because, there's always that.
Unless you really intentionally delete the deletion.
Okay, that's fine. All it is
That
is
would
just
be
saying,
like,
to
okay, you
back
now
up our
have to
work.
redo it.
Right, I always get nervous when other people the more people who have access to things, God forbid, doing something accidentally.
No, I'm
So,
gonna
Edit
actually
access
here.
too?
I'm gonna do a share screen here so you guys can see behind me, and I'm gonna show you kind of
But like I still.
Here,
In
alright,
Google, yeah.
so if I come into the calendar, this is my calendar. No, that's December. This is today, so I come to BOE retreat. I can go to edit event, and right down here, it says create meeting notes, and it automatically creates a document for me. And it says, the document will be shared. Right now it says including those outside, because this is not my setup. But once you do this, right, you can do,
You just type underneath.
yeah, although I like to open it, which is why it's annoying me. Oh, because I didn't save it. So I'm gonna put notes, BOE retreat meeting, save. So now when I come back here, there you go, boom, and this doesn't have the attendees on it, but I can easily say, you know, everybody that's here, and then it's in the calendar. Ultimately, then, you would want to come in at the end, move it to it's yours. Let's just say that it's under BOE documents because this is my drive, and I just moved this directly in there. So it's very easy to do. Took me 2 seconds. We have a document that if somebody fills out and puts, I think somebody should say notes completed by, so that there's the person
It
that
does.
we know.
It does.
It does. Then
Well, we cannot do it from iPad, we have to do it.
No, we probably just need to get you another case as a
Oh, it's only
keyboard.
gonna be 3 or 4.
No, we can
Give 'em
probably get
shares
you
now.
another case that can link a keyboard to the
yeah,
iPad.
you should have a keyboard on the case.
Yeah.
So that
The
piece
purpose
is
of
fine.
what you currently had was exclusively for looking at agenda items, not necessarily taking minutes. But
Yeah,
that's an easy
because
fix.
Are we getting new cases?
I, for some reason, cannot.
Is that all you heard, Laura?
We heard new cases.
Laura just heard the word new.
We've had the same podcast.
She was like, new? Something
No
new?
glitter, no
No,
glitter. It's a
fine.
pain on the carpet.
I heard blue and orange cases, little bulldogs. Okay.
Somebody has a cricket. I always
I
say
do.
cricket.
Crying.
Yeah,
So why don't,
she
I
does.
can't. I don't know. I'm not.
So give me the
creative like
case and I'll put bulldog heads on them.
Okay. Okay. Add it to your list.
There you go.
I mean, I've had the same broken case since I got it.
Alright.
Okay.
Okay. So now, do we want to come back into the content
Yeah, so
of the
content, does
policy?
anybody have issues with the content? Cause now we're getting on time here. We're at 5:37.
The only thing that I felt like when I looked through was a little bit like I wanted to see another description in what was the purpose of safety and security. I don't, did I miss something? I just felt like there was nothing. Although now number 8 is there.
Oh no, because there's a whole bunch that didn't get highlighted. I'm sorry. So like 8
8 was there.
is.
Yep, I noticed it just now, but I did not see it with the highlights before.
Yeah,
This wasn't revised from the one that came out. This was the
No,
one
this
that
is exactly the
Okay.
same one. I printed it out.
Then I don't know how I missed that because I was really looking for it.
Yeah, it's not highlighted.
It's just not highlighted.
I just missed the highlight. I'm sorry.
Blame the editor. No.
I'm over it already. So there is something there.
Yep.
Okay.
I do have a question. So the fact that the board governance, since it's not going to be the same as
Right.
school government that we
doesn't really
had,
exist anymore.
only because policy can be really time consuming when we have to do the reviews and I don't know when the next like
So
You'll get a badge
mandated
soon.
review.
Well,
No,
you're
I mean like when we had to go through all of that. Like when I got on the
Oh.
board, I had to start like they already
No.
had started the process. I
No.
came in, I think on policy, I don't know what
We've-
round.
I think we
But
have.
every single one had to be done. So we had a meeting like every other
That was
week.
Hillary.
2019.
We've updated over
Yeah.
100
That was a
policies
special-
since I came.
But that's what I'm saying,
That
like,
was
but there was
like
like
a
a,
road,
yes, we've updated some, but there was like a mandated,
Like a
we had to
10
start
year
from
or
the
something?
beginning
Is there like
and
a
go
thing?
all the way through. We went through, when I was on policy and it had to be like every other week or really
Some
behind.
sort of
That
like
we
weird.
met.
We were
Road
very,
like
very
15 years
behind.
Okay, so I didn't know if that
We're
was a
only a
thing that we're
little
gonna have to do
bit
again
behind right
or
now.
anytime soon, or if that was
No,
just
she
a
said
because
we
they
were
do a
behind.
lot.
You're behind
We
a
were
long
behind.
time. You updated the majority of your
so
policies
we're
in
on track.
2019.
Yeah, but they adopted, so you guys adopted a
Makes
whole new policy manual
That's true.
Yes.
in 2019.
Yes.
But
Which is
most of those
when I was
policies that were in that manual hadn't been updated since 2017 when you
Yes.
got the original
Right,
copies.
yes.
So for the purposes of you guys knowing, and if any members of the public want to watch this, it'll be I think helpful to see.
So then that isn't going like,
I'm
that's
gonna
not a plan.
share.
Okay. Only because I know how time, that was a
You don't
lot.
wanna
That was,
be involved.
I was involved in it and it was a lot and I just don't wanna be like, you know,
So I'm gonna
that
share
committee
with you
being
what this looks like on
overloaded
our
with too
side.
much responsibility. You know what I mean?
Hold on, so
That was too much.
Lori, I'm just gonna share everyone. This is Strauss Esme, who is basically our aggregator of, aggregator's the wrong word, it's our policy update generator. So when you go into when you come into, I'm just signing in.
I feel like we were just skipping over a lot of those for a while. Cause like we had an influx of ones that were way overdue.
Yeah, so we went through a whole lot. We're much better, but there's just a whole host. So you'll see, we can go months without getting any policy revisions from Strauss Esme, and then we'll get a packet of 25. It completely depends on the legislator, so usually it matches, like it's after legislative cycles. So here you can see this is their last policy alert, 231. And it has all of these. Now you guys haven't seen any of these because we haven't acted on 231 yet. So you'll end up seeing all of these that need to be abolished. And usually they're abolished because something else has already taken over it, or it's no longer required by law, or law has changed significantly. And then you see the ones that have an M, those are mandated. So this school threat assessment team's policy and regulation, I think we actually did that. I'm not 100% sure. If not, it should be on by the end of New Jersey. And you should know that we have access, and when the policy team gets it, they get the information that's been shared. So what they do, I'm gonna come here, is Strauss Esme. So just so you know, one of the things that I did in preparation for us starting to think about governance and bylaws was to actually start doing comparatives between our bylaws and other districts' bylaws. So if you come here, I'm gonna come to policy guides. All of these are basic and generic policies. So I'm gonna give you an example. And you can see when they were last updated. So within here, some of these do not apply at all to us. So APSSD, it's not the right kind of school district. So it was updated, but it's not related to us. Some of these we need to update. So board member orientation and training, I need to revisit. Have we updated or not? But this is board policy 155. So this is what, for instance, what their example language is. That's it. So everything that we've got is has this language in there somewhere, but is much more attuned to who this school district is rather than everybody else. And we have this list for every one of the policies. So when you come here to program, for instance, you can see some policies from here haven't been updated since 1992.
Go to class size, I'm just curious while you're right there. Please. That's awesome.
It has nothing. I mean, it's just
That was
completely.
done in '92.
Yeah, because there's no law that guides this. This is just a policy.
There's a law that guides it for Abbott districts, not for us.
On the
But-
new,
Let's look at one that's been very recent. The surveys, we have passed it. This one I know that we've passed. It was edited in January 2022. This is all related to federal changes in federal law. So when the feds change the law or the state changes the law, you can see Elementary and Secondary Education Act, move into the Protection of People Rights Amendment. This has to be updated. So we get a alert that looks like this. Here, policy alerts. So the last policy alert that we got was in November. And before that it was September. here they're giving us all of the policy language that they've done. You can see here they bold and they strike when they've changed language. And they do it for every single thing unless it's a brand new policy. So when the policy committee gets it, they get a copy of some form of this along with what you would be approving because it's our language that we have to go in and change. Does that make sense? Because like this is the
They're not
policy
seeing
generation.
your screen, they're looking at the index.
Oh, it didn't do that? That's so weird.
Quick question, because I know you're pressed for time, a couple of you are leaving. You still got on the board governance one, number 1 and number 5, what, can you go over that one?
Number 1.
So the school government committee previously did my evaluation.
So school government committee does.
So in that way, we're taking that same group is still doing the primary, and what does that mean? That means all of the board members participate in my evaluation. They're responsible for putting it together, for pulling out all of the pieces, formalizing the document. That's no different from what they had before. I just thought that this language, when we were going through, was just a little more self-contained. So you can side by side it with your current government.
And number 5 then?
Other topics addressed by the governance committee may include the HIV hearings and residency issues, right? Because we have to put them somewhere, so it made sense because that was covered by
Where were they before?
in school government as
government,
well.
yeah.
Because HIV, well, residency issues have to go under policy. I mean, that would be under policy, I would think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, if we're conducting, if we
Right.
have reason to conduct,
Yeah.
it's not, because it's not something we want to let a whole forum know about because it's privacy, we need to keep it at the committee level before we take action on it.
And HIV starts there and then comes to all of us anyway.
Yeah, yeah. It just,
Just go
because it's
somewhere.
highlighted, I didn't know if there was something different.
Oh, no, nothing different,
That I
it's just
would-
has
Better
a
language?
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't know if there was
Yeah.
something I was missing.
No, I mean, when you see here, like, this had, for instance, on
You have to go to.
school government had evaluation instrument, collating the results and reporting to the full board.
Yeah.
Like, so instead
That
of putting
packet you
2
got.
different ones, we put that together for number 1.
Gotcha.
And then we were silent on HIV residency entirely, on all of them previously, so now that has a place to fall. I was just kind of like, what do we see that we're silent on, that we don't talk about? Like the fact that we don't have anywhere where curriculum instruction is actually talked about.
And you want a list of the ones we prefer to be on or something, or email
Well,
on that, or?
Well,
I think the first piece is we have to
We have
approve
to,
this
we have
as
to
a
approve
first
this,
reading.
No, no,
right?
eventually.
So, well, we are, we wanted everybody to talk about this. Hector's already good with this, Paul is good with this. We wanted you guys to all see it as well, talk about it. And then if we have enough people, we can do a first read.
Right.
Tonight. And then, after everybody was okay, we were gonna say you could email, I could send out an email that everybody could respond to.
And I just want to reiterate, I don't know if this was brought up, and maybe some of you do not know. After, just because you have a first reading, if there's any changes between the first reading and the adoption, there can still be done in between, so.
Right.
It's not whatever sign seal delivered today, that's why it's still a first reading, so you still have some time if you want to go back and like, oh, this, and then.
And depending how big the change is, I guess, right? I
Right.
mean, it's small changes, not a
Right.
big deal. Something major.
I would be,
No.
I mean, I'm careful with that, just like I am with contract language, because then it becomes well, what happens if
We can't
you
adhere to
can't
it.
come and now
Yeah.
you've looked like you've narrowed yourself into that. That's where the governance manual comes in. So we need to say in policy what we know and what we're gonna make sure is from here on out. But for something like
That makes sense.
language around that, how narrow do you want it to be? Because that's
No.
gonna then commit you as board
Right.
members and any other future board members
I'm sorry,
to a
about what?
specific set of action.
What was it that you're specifically talking about?
Create schedule for committee meetings.
Oh,
Mandated meetings almost.
oh, okay.
But if
can
you
be
write it in the
canceled.
contract, that you
schedule,
are
but
gonna
if
have
there's nothing
meetings.
to talk about that
don't
day,
let
just
that
You can
cancel,
write
you know,
it
but at
and
least have a
cancel
date
it.
ahead of time.
You
Say,
can
look,
write that
if we
into the
meet, we're gonna
language,
meet on
yeah.
this day.
Okay.
And that's,
And then
could that,
what
It's
other towns have
technically
done is
here,
been like,
here is
well,
so much
we
as
don't have
committee
anything to talk, we're
chairperson
not
may
gonna
call a
meet
meeting
then.
by making arrangements through the
We'll meet
president.
next week,
So, like,
instead of just getting.
this, once again, this becomes a board-generated movement, so whoever's on the committee can call the chairperson and say, I wanna create a schedule of meetings. I think some of this become, what practices do we wanna have? I would just, my 2 cents is before you get too specific on it, think about the broader part of it, and then how much is practice?
I brought it up because I think that's a practice cycle. I don't know if everybody does it.
Everybody's seen it.
I don't think I would put it in hard fact that we're gonna have a meeting once a month.
No, I didn't say once
Oh,
a
or
month, I
once-
said that
Standing
create
meeting.
schedule.
Have to be
Just say
scheduled
that a schedule
in
would be
the-
created.
Just like we have scheduled for board meetings.
What did you say before? What were your hopes to meet before the board meeting? Which two of the committees each?
you're just
Time
talking about for
for time
college,
to
or
budget.
budget.
No,
Like
no,
the
we were
budget.
talking about the budget meetings, we're gonna end up
Okay, so
seeing like,
just for that.
yeah, we know that we're gonna have that, that committee, coming up. So, so I say that to say, our challenge as a board, this is a board decision. So I'm gonna leave that there and say it's a board decision. If the board as a whole says we wanna create an annual schedule, great. If the board says we don't, but we wanna have a better practice of scheduling ahead of time, or at least having some scheduled meetings, this is an opportunity for this board to create a practice that may not have been a part of previous boards. So I'm gonna leave it there to go, how do you move from policy to practice? That's all into what we do. Cause likewise, we could set a schedule and never meet. Say, oh, no, don't have anything to talk about, don't have anything. It's gonna be about practice.
Sorry.
Well, in a perfect world, what would your language look like?
Well, in the perfect world, I would like to have some kind of schedule for each committee to meet. And we can see how it falls, because obviously 1 month it's heavy on finance, then next month it's maybe heavy on something else. But yeah, to have a schedule once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks, but we only know when we look at the calendar and how things fall for each committee to meet. And this option to cancel if there's nothing to discuss, but like I said, it's very strange to me that could be, very often that we have nothing to discuss.
Do you feel that's something we should put in the first reading, like just saying that
No,
there's,
we
or
can-
committees just do that on their
Talking
own?
about
We can do-
creating a practice. I think
Or
more
like
than-
Well, but I think what I
Wait,
hear
I-
Well,
Elena
I
saying
think the
is that
question
this
is
is
whether we
important
put
enough.
that in the first reading where we say a schedule should be adopted, that's it, very
You
simple,
could say
or
maybe adopted.
maybe adopted.
I have a question though, what, just give me a better perspective. What do you feel like in this, like, let's say past year, that we should have had a committee meeting on, but didn't?
I have
Only
no-
because, you can create something
I
that,
have no idea.
okay, well, that's what I'm saying, like, if you
Well-
feel like there was a missing of something, we could have a meeting just to,
Or
and
is
then
it-
just
or
like
is it
create
something
things
as
to
simple
talk
as
about,
each
or
meet-
if there's really things that
or is
pushed
it
out to you
something
that
as simple
needed
as-
that
Are
extra
you
conversation.
saying that, so I hear 2 things. I hear that a schedule would be good, not
Not just
like
hey,
really
we're gonna
fast,
meet in 2
come
days.
in 2 days, because
Yeah,
so you
it's
could plan
time.
accordingly, I heard that. And then I also heard that some committees meet very often, some don't meet at all. So,
I
and
think
you,
that's gonna die though, because if we're smushing
Right.
the committees, but I'm hearing like, or is it, each
So,
committee will.
I'm throwing this out there
You
as an
can have a
example,
finance
maybe
meeting
some language
a
to
ton of
say,
times a year.
obviously, it's all on you, right? But it's to say that each committee will meet at a minimum
Once a quarter or
once a
something.
quarter,
Yeah, that's what I was, right.
Strive to.
or strive to meet once a quarter,
Right.
at a minimal or something.
Right, like I was thinking, use it once a quarter.
Right, because
And then I was also thinking, we went from board meetings every 2 weeks to board meetings every 4 weeks. Can we kind of assume that that in between Monday can be our committee day? Just so this way we kind of
Yeah.
know we
Spread
keep
it out a
Mondays as like our,
No, because but then that's like
The problem
18
is that
hours
there
for
is
them.
something going on this year,
That might not be next, right.
like
right.
negotiations happens.
Right.
Like there are things that take up time that do, like, I don't know.
But
I think
I
there's
think-
busing. The busing thing was
The
that, you know, when we had
But I
that
think-
problem
I
with the
think
bus,
each-
that we had to like move things forward because there's an incident.
Right.
Whereas if there are no problems with transportation, then like I don't need to talk about anything because there's really nothing going on. Like there are times when like there's issues that pop up where you're like, we need to do this because there's a problem. But like normally transportation should just literally be like, meh, like nothing should happen. In a
From your
perfect
mouth
world.
to God's ears.
Right, but there are things that pop up, and
I
that's when those committee need, you know, things are needed.
But now that these committees are condensed,
Right,
you know,
you should.
maybe,
I think there will be.
then the chairman can say, look, let's do it on a Monday, or let's do it whatever. You know,
At the
then, I think then you let
discretion
the committee, each individual
I'm
committee take
typing
the
some
day.
I
stuff
think
back
it'll
here.
feel more like we need more.
Yeah,
people.
this is how I,
Look, we can meet
this
on
is how I
finance
kind of
once a
chew
month
on
if we
these
want.
things.
Right, so like for
Discuss,
example,
hey, what are we
anything,
working
but
on,
that
what's the
doesn't necessarily mean
referendum money
that is
going,
something
where,
to
you
talk
know.
about.
No, but you
Right.
wanna be updated
Verbiage,
on just
so.
things that,
Right.
I hear you.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
well, it's not me, it's you guys.
Well,
in
I
the corner.
There's a difference between
Right, so let's just say year
Well,
one.
I hear the
Remember, this is your,
I hear the
versus
caution.
finance can be.
What
so
are
Christy, to your
differences?
point, this is the bylaw for the year and until the next
Next
board, whenever years, decades down the road decides to change it. So while you're good with Mondays, let's just say you three are on a committee,
I wouldn't put a
Mondays
date
may
in
work for
there.
you, but Mondays may not work for this committee. So it could just be,
That's why we need to
Right.
create like a calendar.
Yeah, you never know.
And Hillary, I don't think, like, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't think committee needs to meet only when there's an issue to discuss. That's why I think committees need to meet on a regular basis, because I look at it as like a project management, right? You manage projects through the meetings, that's how you make things flow.
That's a good
You
point.
don't meet, things don't happen.
I don't disagree, I'm happy, you know this from our conversations, I'm happy to always give, hey, there's an update, here's where we are.
And sometimes it's better to be a little proactive by knowing what's going on, what situations might come up, than being reactive when they pop up. You know, it's a fault in government sometimes.
That's why
Where
I
government
said.
becomes more reactive.
So I
than
threw
proactive.
some language
Just, hey,
in
what's
here.
going on in finance, what's going on, you know, what do you see maybe becoming a problem down
You
the
just have
road?
to like a touch point. Like,
Yeah. You know, you wanna be ahead of the game a little bit, you know, just to keep in the loop.
Our challenge would be a couple things, and I'm gonna just be open. You need me or Michelle at meeting, with the exception of my evaluation, right? If you said I need to be on certain nights, I have to be able to say, no, I can't. I got a kid's,
I'm not
fencing
worried- I'm not
tournament,
worried about
Michelle's
that night.
in
It
super
has to
softball
be,
and
or you
comp,
have to-
yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's another point to just bring up because I feel like I'll say I make myself available the best I can, but we don't have like perfect attendance every week to week, and now we're adding in more required meetings, and I feel like it's almost like you're setting it up to fail if you're like based on the chairperson, like people all have to find their availabilities.
Well, I think
make
the
that
committee as a whole says, all right, you know what, if we could meet on Mondays, from, I don't know, 11:30 to 1:30, there's nothing saying
Right.
that there has to be a certain time. It just would need to
And
be,
again, it could be remote, you
Yeah,
know, just to
I
make
mean,
it easier.
Just
Can it be
talking,
remote?
yeah, no,
I think it
For
can,
committees,
committees. I think, committees
So-
it can.
It can.
And
so
I just
you
think
have,
we have to
so
also.
again, this is probably another bylaw.
Yeah.
You have to go in and
Make it.
determine,
That you can make committee meetings remote.
is there state statute on it?
No. There was just the emergency, which required us to stream. Right now, it's not a requirement, but it's,
Committees don't stream.
no.
Oh.
But even the use of like, because you
Right.
can't call in, your board policy doesn't allow you to call in for board meetings. Right, for voting purposes, it's just,
Right, but for-
The real McCoy.
no, I mean, I'm just saying, you may wanna look at other bylaws, just in case, to make sure
I'm gonna
that,
come back to, that's thus the reason for having a governance
Right.
committee.
Right.
Because we haven't looked at that, we have taken tradition and just said, all right, well, this is what you do, but I'm really happy because I feel like this is a different board
Right.
than the board that I first came in, and not in a bad way. I think that it's been productive, I've learned a lot, we've made some shifts in practice. But now it's time to formalize some of those pieces because I think that's an important piece of cohesiveness in the future. What are our expectations? I'm watching boards across the state of New Jersey dissipate into complete madness. And at some point, we just have to stop and go, yeah, no, that's not how we're ever going to operate. We're not going to let it happen. We're gonna have a really clear process. This is what it's gonna be. We're all gonna agree with this as a process. So, with that being said, Elena, this language here, so I added, committee chairpersons may work in consultation with their committee members to suggest a schedule for committee meetings and communicate such request to the president for consultation with administration. I think that makes it, that's putting that in there as having some, I would say it makes it important because we put it there, but it doesn't necessarily have something that you guys can come back and start yelling at each other about because you didn't do it. I'm saying that because I'm watching boards get into this fine grip of, oh, you failed to do this right, and like I don't think that's who we are, and I don't want to give anybody the room to do that. I say that protectively as wanting to keep Springfield as a strong board.
I did like there being an expectation of at least meeting a few times a year though, like a quarterly.
But I think that I think when you look at this, we were joking, there's not gonna be anything to talk about. There's going to be things to talk about because we're condensing these committees into stronger. The way I see it is there are stronger committees now because you have so much more in one.
Look,
Well,
can
Adriana
I say one thing?
suggested a good word. The word was strive.
Yeah.
So you can say each committee will strive to meet quarterly.
I think there's always gonna be things to talk
At
about
least once quarterly,
Right.
like, that's the word.
I think you bring a good point, Chris. I think from what I heard sometimes in the past, committees felt that were up here felt they didn't get some information ahead of time, right? Or didn't get things that they felt they should have gotten. Well, in these committees, when you meet, and not just meet when you had to, you meet and you can bring up issues. Hey, what's going on with this? Or what's going on with that? Forcing.
But you want your committee meeting to be productive. You
Right.
can do that and pick up the phone and say what's going on anytime when you're stuck in traffic somewhere.
Well,
What's going on? We don't need to take
But now you're narrowing it
time
down
in your
to like,
calendar.
We're
okay,
on
house
an annual,
finance.
we're on annual
What,
board-
you know,
board
what's
calendars
caused,
always
what
But
might be
we
some
have
problem
an
in the budget?
administrator sitting in the seat to do this stuff for us. Like, we don't need to be involved in every
I agree.
decision. That's not our
No,
role.
I agree with that, but I'm saying at least there's no reason to say, hey, well, I never got that information. Well, you met. You know, why didn't you ask, or why didn't you get? You know what I'm saying? Like, it prevents mistakes from the past. Not that they're there now, but it's just so they will never happen again.
Like with
Even if
me.
it's different, if it's a different administration.
I can tell you I've been here in the 4 years that I've been here, and I mean this honestly. I've been very open and transparent with
absolutely.
every board member, and when you have an issue, we've had a lot.
Right.
And I mean, before other stuff, just like a lot. And so I'm gonna say, I think that's a piece I don't want us to lose, is getting so
And I agree wholeheartedly.
distrustful that we have to create
No,
these like
I
pieces
agree.
of
I
this.
agree wholeheartedly. But like you said, it's setting a base for the future.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's say we're all here and everything's great with you guys. 15 years from now, when it's a different people or different group, that at least they can't go back to say, hey, you know, so the way it was before. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they'll made it their own too, right?
It's setting, you know, again, it's looking at the future, like you said. I agree in that a lot. Setting up something so that, you know, because new members, new board members and new administrators will not know what happened in the past. They may think they will know, but they're not gonna know what caused, you know, you see it now.
Well, it's a guide, it's guidance.
So
every
that, you know, certain things are
board
set
group
up
that comes after.
certain way to prevent mistakes from the past that you weren't aware of. You know, new members 15 years from now are not gonna know the mistakes that were made maybe with previous superintendents
Oh, I mean,
and
it's
previous board.
all.
So it's not.
Somebody
it's
will
not a
be
judge-
there to tell you.
No, you think so.
You can look at our Google Doc. of
Yeah,
all of
somebody
No,
will tell you the mistakes
you
that we
think
made.
that, I mean, you see, I don't know.
My
I see
daughter.
stuff on the township committee where I'm like, discussions that were done.
Well, thank
15
God
years ago,
we're
you
not them, because.
No, but I mean, not us, but people that come in.
No, yeah, but
You
my
know what I'm
question,
saying? I don't
Jerry,
know if I'm explaining.
when you're saying about saying what's going on with finance, are you talking about within the committee that houses finance?
I mean,
Because-
problems that might be coming up that you see in the future. Like, you want to stay ahead of any potential problems, right? Some you can't. You know, the boiler breaks. But things that, like, finance used to say, hey, look, you know, this might be something in the future that will be a problem, whether it's healthcare, transportation. Healthcare was going up. We knew that, right? 50% increase because the state healthcare plan was going up. We weren't on that plan, but I'm using it as, you know, this is what I'm hearing
you know, getting ahead, just being a little ahead of potential problems and not waiting for her to come in and all of a sudden, hey, we need to have a meeting because healthcare went up 50%.
Well, I'm hopeful
You know what I'm
that,
saying?
I'm hopeful that it,
I'm about being proactive and not as reactive. We're always gonna be reactive. There are
Jerry, I
problems.
would say we have shifted the way the budgets are been discussed here pretty significantly, and I'll say that we haven't had a budget year where we haven't set those statements before we've
Right.
identified
No
those. So I'm really
surprises.
proud of that, and I'd like to see it continue. With that being said, I'm gonna just stop for a second and say, being mindful of the fact that it's 6:04 and we've got children, we've got we have multiple family obligations. I adjusted this language to, now I just took that piece around the meeting date and said, committee chairpersons may work in consultation with their committee members to suggest a schedule for committee meetings with the goal of meeting at least once per quarter and communicate such request to the president for consultation with the administration. Is that the beginning of the language that you think will help encourage the right practice without it coming back to kind of bite us, so to speak?
I don't want to force anybody, so the way I read it, it's up to each committee to decide
Yeah.
if they need this.
And then set a you've set it like the language standard is once per quarter. So it's not necessarily monthly, it's not weekly, it shouldn't be an overwhelming burden, but it should certainly be enough to be able to have a functional discussion about where the district is in those categories. And the truth is that sometimes it goes beyond those categories. There's no way to run one thing without thinking about it, but it gives an opportunity to have a thoughtful conversation. And then we have a process by which we set meeting notes. We'll go from there. And we'll assume that the agenda will always include items related to the title of the committee. Because the agendas could be broad, they could be narrow, depending on the need.
And I know that other districts meet remotely.
Yeah, it just completely depends on the boards. I mean, it depends, I'll say it entirely depends on the board.
I also just wanted to add one thing that I feel like historically was what my understanding was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that when minutes come out from these agendas and that they're published or whatever for the board, it also is not, there's a lot of information where it'll say like contact the chairperson for more details, because you can't be putting confidential type information on these minutes because these documents are not confidentially, like whatever, they're not classified in a way that you shouldn't be putting. So just like for any chair people, like you can't put sensitive information or about
We didn't
students or
discuss
anyone.
that. I think it was talked about
Okay,
that
sorry.
it's not gonna be verbatim,
Right.
so it may just
It'll say
we'll
contact you if
discuss
they're-
blank,
Yeah.
very like
Bullets, almost.
bullets.
Right.
Can-
But
can
that was
somebody-
tricky. That was hard for me because I wanted to.
You want to
Can
put
a
it?
I wanted
resident
to like
Oprah that?
sit in high school and college.
Board committee meetings
Stenography.
are, yes, they're
So-
public records.
That's why.
They're public records, so you have to be careful what you put in there.
But you have to
Because
be
you
careful
can't put
what
a
you
child's name, you
say
can't put-
in the meeting.
Well, that's
No,
one.
I mean, yes and
Some
no.
things,
Yeah.
they're, and any record could be requested. It just,
Right.
if you falls under the exceptions or
I also-
exemptions.
Right, there's only a certain amount, it's like clothes, there's only a certain amount of things that you
Right.
can't
Right.
put out in the open
But it's not a meeting.
because it's
No,
like clothes.
not the
no?
same.
different. I mean,
suppose.
that's the benefit of
It's just a
having a committee
conversation.
meeting is that we get, like, if we
Well,
wanted to
if
have
the
this,
public can Oprah
They-
it, then,
But
they
they
can
can't
open,
come to the
they're
meeting.
not coming to the meeting.
right,
They get that
So that's
whatever
right.
we put
In writing.
in the writing. So
Right.
if you
Have a
said we
conversation.
talked about Joe Smith family,
right.
I don't know that there's a Joe Smith, I just took the move.
John Doe.
John Doe.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere there's a John Doe. I don't believe here,
Not
but
here.
we discussed the John Doe family. You violated confidentiality by putting something in. So it's why we're careful.
Would you
It's the
be
same
allowed
thing with HIB.
Yeah, you're not in a meeting. You're just
You're not.
talking.
It's not Open Public Meetings Act because there's not a quorum.
But that's
So,
why you can't
things
share
that are-
that out.
Need to be exempt, that, they would have to be
Yeah,
redacted.
no, that makes sense.
The
No,
whole,
of course.
we've actually had documents like 100%
So
redacted.
you don't
Well, and
want
then
that.
you'll notice
Have a
here
title.
on this, it says at the bottom, draft and deliberative.
Right.
So the purpose of this is about board policy. We're at the place where it wasn't shared with the
Public,
community as a whole, but now technically, they can certainly take it, and it meant that there was nobody could have made a copy of this and said, oh, we already made this happen, because I have the original document, so.
No, I think,
I mean, documents in draft
I
form are
think
not.
confidentiality, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Understood, but also not every time what we discuss on committee is confidential. It's not always
That's true.
confidential.
That's true. And a lot of it'll come out, and if we're sitting in, and if you're sitting in, for instance, if we have the language here that the chairperson shall discuss, this at a board meeting. So then at the board meeting, you're saying, we talked about this. You'll see tonight, this policy like you would have the ability to kind of give a summary that may have more information or less, as long as you're really keeping it tight about it.
I think just that addition is going to make everybody feel
Right.
more in the know.
An outline even. It's just, I was just always told to limit detail because you realize that anyone could be reading this document because it's not protected or whatever. I don't know.
No, it's something to be thoughtful about. I mean, it's just something.
I won't write anything mean about you, Dr. Holbrook, okay?
This week.
Today.
I just
Today.
have a quick question on the, you had said that what was highlighted was added?
Mhm.
Okay. On
Unless I missed it, and I
Okay.
get up clear,
Okay.
and I won't hold you to it.
Okay.
Thanks, so.
the school administration, academic programs and athletics
Yeah.
in the 2.2
Mm-hmm.
talks about 5-year curricular development plan. Did we not do that before? We just didn't have it in the
It wasn't
bylaw.
in here.
It wasn't part of the committee, so we do it annually. So you'll see, usually it has been, well, hold on, since I got here, we started to do it annually. So, and they did it annually, but they did it at different times, and we made it all in one. So usually it falls in the August board meeting. July or August, and it's it basically, the state has a rule for every 5 years, and we have to have a plan. No, it works differently than that. It's basically like ELA is in the 5-year plan. It's reviewed in 2025 because state standards just changed. So once the state standards change, assuming that the state standards don't change again, and at the rate they've been changing state standards on us, we might as well just.
Right.
I say that to say that we're required by CUSAC to make sure that we have a plan for curriculum review and revision. So then we formalize that, the board sees it every year, because then next year you get that 5-year piece. But we haven't had a committee where that's even been a conversation. It's usually school government. It all kind of fell under school government, and the goal was to break it up a little bit.
Is it an option to see academic programming in person?
Where does it say
No,
that?
I'm just asking you.
It's
Is that
that-
an option?
Yeah, and actually it's in here under, I think.
Wait, what do you mean in person?
Yeah, what do you mean? What's in person?
You know, like the way that you did the tour of the school, if there's a new programs being introduced, is that something that like we can actually see
In action.
in action?
I'd say yes, it falls under what I've tried to do is say to you guys, if you wanna come and do a tour of the school, let me know what you're interested in seeing. At any given time, we have a lot of new things,
There's something.
I would put it under, as a board member, tell me when you wanna do a tour of the school and what you wanna see, or if you wanna see something.
Like a math lesson for the new math program or something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of interested in the. I actually asked Maggie what she thought of the new
Math program?
Yeah, but what's the name of it? I want to say
Mathematics.
Easy Street, but that's
No,
not
it's
Easy
not,
Is it?
Not easy.
The opposite of everyday math.
I can't tell you right
No,
now,
it was
I'm
the-
sorry,
it was
I know which one it is.
Reveal.
ready.
I ready. Oh my
I'm
god.
ready.
Yes.
I ready.
So let's come back to,
Reading Street.
is with this addition now, is this a place where you wanna move forward? I mean, how do you wanna move forward, because now we're at the place of action.
I mean, what's the consensus of the?
I'd make a motion.
Fine with this.
Jerry made the motion. I heard him.
Second
Make
then.
a motion
You make a motion to do what?
for the first reading.
Okay.
So, yep,
Okay.
Yeah.
so we need a second.
Christy just, oh,
I second it.
Yelena
Oh, no,
did.
Yelena did.
So, Yelena did, so move, so first read is moved moved by
Can I get a?
Mr. Fernandez and seconded by Mrs. Zolotarsky. All in favor, do we need a roll call? Nope. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
And then how do you wanna request, just email you? Or
Yeah,
just-
do you want me to
wanna make
send
a
out
list
an
right
email? And
I
then
would suggest
Why
that
don't
you
you
send out
send
an
out,
email
yeah.
with the
I'll
names of the
send
new
out
ones
an
and
email.
then.
BCC.
I'll
Oh, I've been
send-
doing it.
Yeah, see,
I've been
isn't it-
doing it.
isn't it
I'm
better
working on
than-
it. I'm working on it.
It's good, right? Better than,
okay.
don't
We're
respond.
I know, I don't have to
The
put
first
that.
couple times I
I'm
ever
still
did,
like
I was
worried, I worried that
BCC
nobody
just
trusted
in
me.
case.
Yes, and I left you off of, I think, 2 emails.
I need to
But
open
that's-
public
I'm sorry.
session.
You're now, it
Seeing
pops
none,
up
I'm
now,
closing
so
public
Adrian,
session.
if I left you
Who
off
was
of
offended
anything
by
about it, it was
BCC?
not intentional.
Oh.
What?
Well,
No
And
comments.
I believe it was Scott that said that I couldn't be CC because
I
it
said
wasn't
second, there you
right
go.
to not
Michelle.
have everybody know who was receiving that letter.
I think
Motion
we're-
to
It's the only way though that you
Hold
don't
on.
have to worry
Open
about the
public,
whole
there was
getting
no
it back.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
I
I
know,
closed
and we were
public.
doing
Can we
that.
just go into close
Then we
for
don't
2
know who the
seconds?
recipients
Yes, we
are.
could.
Yeah, and
I
then
know
we'll,
that you
from
care,
there,
but-
cause I need, I have a personnel,
Oh, okay.
brief,
Um,
very, very brief thing.
Okay, so not, we're not.
Not
adjourned
adjourned,
yet.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
So I
I'm
need a
just
motion
gonna-
to go into closed.
Well, yeah,
Motion to go into closed.
second.
Moved by,
Christie,
motion to go into closed by Mrs. Rubin, seconded by Mr. Fernandez.
all in favor?
We're in closed.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm leaving the webinar. Let's turn off